The wind howled as his tires cut through the cold morning air. Every muscle in his body burned, but he couldn't stop. He was leading. And that was the problem. Jamal Kendrick could barely feel his fingers wrapped around the handlebars. His breath came in ragged gasps, white clouds dissolving into the frigid morning air. His legs, numb, burning, aching, kept pedaling. Faster. Harder. He wasn't just racing against the men behind him. He was racing against doubt, against expectation, against a system that never thought someone like him could be here. The Southwest Regional Championship was the gateway to professional cycling, one of the most prestigious amateur races in the country. It was where corporate sponsors scouted future stars, where rising talents secured contracts that turned hobbies into careers, where elite teams recruited the best of the best. But the best weren't supposed to look like him. Jamal's mind flickered back to the start of the race, the skeptical glances, the sideways smirks, the hushed whispers. He had seen it all before. The unspoken message was always the same: he didn't belong. But now, in the final stretch, as he surged ahead of the competition, it wasn't whispers chasing him. It was the sound of elite riders, men backed by six-figure sponsorships, state-of-the-art equipment, and decades of tradition, fighting to keep up. He could see the finish line. And no one was in front of him. Jamal wasn't supposed to be here. He grew up in Atlanta, Georgia, in a neighborhood where cycling wasn't a sport. It was a mode of survival. He rode hand-me-down bikes, fixed with rusted chains and wobbly tires, just to get to school. He fell in love with the sport watching the Tour de France on a tiny television in his uncle's barbershop. But love wasn't enough. Cycling was expensive. The best bikes cost more than what his family made in 3 months. Training camps required travel, hotel stays, and coaching fees. Even entry fees for major races felt like a luxury he couldn't afford. Still, he found a way. He worked double shifts at a local grocery store, saved every dollar, and bought a second-hand racing bike from a pawn shop. He trained alone, riding before sunrise, after work, through empty streets and up steep hills, mimicking the training regimens he read about online. And he won. Again and again. Small races, local events, underground competitions. He crushed them all. But every victory came with the same response: you got lucky. You're fast, but you're not elite. Real cycling is different. He stopped listening. And today, on the biggest stage of his life, he was about to prove them all wrong. From the starting line, Jamal knew the odds were stacked against him. The Southwest Regional Championship was a battlefield of sponsored riders, athletes from powerhouse teams, equipped with bikes that cost more than his entire life savings. And then there was him, wearing a plain black jersey with no logos, riding an outdated model. Alone. The moment the race began, the strategy was clear: box him out. They tried to force him to the edge, making him waste energy early. They underestimated him. He conserved his strength, stayed low, found gaps in the pack, and made his moves at just the right moments. The hills. He powered through them. The sprints. He matched their pace. Then, in the last 5 miles, he saw his opportunity. The leader, Trevor Langston, a favorite backed by $1 million team, started to tire. Jamal attacked. Trevor's head snapped around in shock as Jamal blew past him. The crowd gasped. Commentators scrambled. A no-name cyclist was leading the championship. The final mile was pure instinct. Every muscle screamed for relief. Every doubt he had ever carried clawed at him. But he refused to slow down. As the finish line loomed, Jamal did something no one expected. He won. For a second, there was only silence. Then the crowd erupted. Spectators roared. Fans leaned over barricades, screaming his name. Photographers scrambled to capture the moment. The announcers, caught off guard, fumbled for words. But among the race organizers, a different kind of reaction took place. A tight group of men in suits stood near the official's tent. Their expressions weren't excitement. They were concern. One of them, a sharp-dressed man with a USA Cycling pin on his lapel, pulled out his phone. He turned to the man beside him, voice low. "We have a problem." He wasn't supposed to win. Jamal raised his fists in victory, chest heaving, barely able to process what just happened. A camera crew rushed toward him. The interviewer, an older woman with a press badge, beamed as she held up a mic. "Jamal Kendrick, You just shocked the cycling world. How does it feel to be the new champion? He tried to catch his breath. He wiped sweat from his face, swallowing the lump in his throat. I trained for this. I knew I could do it. Before he could say more, someone grabbed his shoulder. A race official. No congratulations. No handshake. Just a tense expression. We need to verify some things. Come with us. Jamal frowned. He had seen champions celebrate. He had seen how winners were treated. This wasn't it. His stomach twisted. Something was wrong. As Jamal was led away, the energy of the event shifted. The second-place finisher, Trevor Langston, was already being interviewed by another network. The questions weren't about his loss. Tough race today, Trevor. Do you think something unexpected happened out there? Trevor, still out of breath, smirked. Yeah, that was interesting. I mean, the race has certain standards, you know? I'll let the officials handle it. Jamal, watching from the sidelines, clenched his jaw. His phone buzzed in his pocket. A text from an unknown number. They're trying to take it from you. His pulse quickened. What? He muttered under his breath. Before he could respond, a voice came over the loudspeakers. Attention, riders. Due to an issue with race regulations, results are currently under review. The cheers from the crowd quieted. Jamal's heart pounded. The race was over. He had won. But somehow, it was just the beginning. Jamal stood near the podium, sweat still dripping down his brow, waiting. He had envisioned this moment 1,000 times, the medal placed around his neck, the flash of cameras, the weight of victory settling into his bones. But something was off. No one was coming. Race officials huddled together near the judge's booth, whispering. Across the stage, the second-place finisher, Trevor Langston, was surrounded by journalists, microphones in his face. They spoke to him as if he had won. Jamal scanned the crowd. His supporters cheered, but their excitement was turning into confusion. The announcers stalled, filling time with forced commentary. We're still awaiting final confirmation on results, folks, but, what a race today. Jamal's stomach clenched. Something was wrong. A bald man in a navy suit, one of the race officials, walked toward him, his expression unreadable. Mr. Kendrick, we need to speak with you. The meeting room smelled of stale coffee and expensive cologne. 5 race officials sat behind a long table, their expressions a mix of forced politeness and veiled condescension. Jamal sat across from them, his hands still trembling from the adrenaline of the race. He wasn't sure if it was exhaustion or anger keeping him upright. The bald official, Martin Lowell, cleared his throat. There's been a discrepancy in the results. Jamal blinked. A discrepancy. Martin exchanged glances with the others before sliding a piece of paper across the table. According to race regulations, all competitors must meet certain eligibility requirements. Upon review, we found that. He adjusted his tie. Your bike does not meet the technical specifications required for this level of competition. Jamal felt like he'd been punched in the gut. My bike, he repeated, voice sharp. What are you talking about? I passed the inspection before the race. Martin folded his hands. There was an oversight. The ruling stands. Jamal's breath came short and quick. His heart hammered against his ribs. You're telling me, he said slowly, that after I cross the finish line, after I win, you suddenly find a problem. Silence. This is bullshit. Another official, an older man with glasses, sighed. Mr. Kendrick, we're simply following the rules. The second-place rider will be awarded the victory. We hope you understand. Jamal pushed back his chair so hard it scraped the floor. I understand perfectly. He turned and walked out, fists clenched. By the time Jamal stepped outside, the whispers had already begun. Journalists murmured into their microphones. Fans scrolled through their phones, their expressions shifting from excitement to disbelief. Twitter, Instagram, and sports forums exploded with the news. Breaking, Southwest Championship winner disqualified after rule review. Jamal Kendrick stripped of victory. Technical issue, raises eyebrows. Trevor Langston stood at the podium now, accepting his trophy, flashing a tight-lipped smile like he knew this was always going to happen. Jamal's vision blurred with rage. He was standing in plain sight, but it felt like he was disappearing. The car ride home was a blur. Jamal sat in the back seat, phone blowing up with texts, missed calls, and notifications. One stood out. Unknown number. This isn't the first time they've done this. His blood ran cold. Before he could respond, his manager, Aaron Reed, turned in the front seat. We need to go public with this. Aaron was more than a manager. He was a friend, the only one who believed in Jamal when no one else did. Jamal exhaled sharply. If I speak out, they'll bury me. They're already trying to. Aaron tapped on his phone. We get ahead of it. We control the story before they do. Jamal hesitated, staring out the window as city lights blurred past. He wasn't just fighting for himself anymore. He nodded. Let's do it. The next morning, Jamal's face was everywhere. ESPN, Sports Illustrated, CNN. He sat stiffly in the chair across from Vanessa Holt, a well-known investigative journalist. The camera crew adjusted their angles. The studio lights burned hot against his skin. Jamal, Vanessa began. Yesterday, you won one of the biggest races of your life. Hours later, you were disqualified. Do you believe this was intentional? Jamal clenched his jaw. I think the cycling world has an image of what a champion is supposed to look like. And when I didn't fit that image, they changed the rules. Vanessa leaned in. Some are calling this a pattern. Elite cycling has a history of keeping certain athletes out. Do you believe race played a role? Jamal's throat tightened. He had spent his entire career avoiding this conversation, focusing on his skill, his training, his hard work. But this wasn't just about him anymore. He looked straight into the camera. Yes. The interview went viral. Hashtags flooded social media. Hashtag Let Jamal Ride trended worldwide. Fans, athletes, and activists spoke out. The Southwest Cycling Committee released a weak statement, claiming the decision was purely regulatory. But it wasn't enough. The pressure was mounting. Then, the first threat came. Jamal sat in his apartment, staring at his laptop. Anonymous emails filled his inbox. Drop this before it gets ugly. They'll ruin you. You think you're the first. You won't be the last. His hands curled into fists. He was being warned, no, intimidated, into silence. Then his phone rang. Blocked caller. He hesitated, then answered. Hello. A muffled voice spoke quickly. They've been doing this for years. You need to look into the 2014 Nationals. It was the same playbook. Same excuses. Jamal sat up. Who is this? Click. The line went dead. His pulse hammered. This wasn't just about him. This was bigger. He looked down at the racing committee's website, scrolling through past winners, past controversies. And then he saw it. 2014 Nationals. The winner was disqualified after a rule review. The title was handed to someone else. The name of the disqualified rider? Dante Miles. Jamal inhaled sharply. It was happening again. And he wasn't going to let it. Jamal woke up to a storm. Not of wind or rain, but of outrage. His phone buzzed relentlessly on the nightstand, notifications flooding in faster than he could read them. Thousands of messages. His name was trending. Let Jamal Ride had become a movement. They changed the rules after he won. Absolute corruption. This has happened before. Cycling needs a reckoning. We stand with Jamal Kendrick. Give him his win back. Jamal's heart pounded. This wasn't just a fight for his title anymore. It was bigger. His manager, Aaron Reed, called. Get dressed. We're going to the station. What station? The one that just got a leaked email proving they set you up. Jamal bolted upright. Wait, what? Aaron's voice was electric. We got him. At the news studio, the air was thick with anticipation. Vanessa Holt, the journalist who had interviewed Jamal before, sat poised at her desk, a manila folder in her hands. Ladies and gentlemen, what we have here is shocking. The screen behind her lit up with email screenshots. These are internal communications from the Southwest Cycling Committee, leaked by an anonymous source. And they reveal something damning. Email 1. If Kendrick wins, we have a problem. A big one. Email 2. There's still time to adjust technical specifications. We need to make sure everything checks out. Email 3. We cannot let this result stand. It will change the image of our sport. Silence. Then an eruption of gasps, curses, and disbelief. Vanessa turned to the camera. The rule change wasn't about regulations. It was about keeping someone like Jamal Kendrick from winning. Jamal exhaled, his hands tightening into fists. They had proof. The committee couldn't bury this now. Hours later, a mysterious email hit Jamal's inbox. Meet me at 9 p.m. I have more. The location: a dimly lit parking garage. The kind of place where secrets were traded. Jamal and Aaron pulled in, their headlights bouncing off concrete pillars. In the distance, a hooded figure leaned against a silver sedan. The figure stepped forward, then pulled down their hood. It was Martin Lowell, the same race official who had disqualified him. Jamal's fists clenched. You. Martin's face was drawn, his eyes darting nervously. Listen, I didn't want to do this. His voice wavered. But the board, they pressured me. This goes higher than you think. Aaron crossed his arms. Why are you telling us now? Martin exhaled shakily. Because they're coming after me next. Jamal narrowed his eyes. What do you mean? Martin glanced around. Then he pulled out his phone. He hit play. Official 1, we couldn't let him win. It would change everything. Official 2, if this gets out, cycling's done. Make sure Kendrick knows what's at stake. Jamal's pulse pounded. They weren't just protecting a rule, they were protecting an entire system. And now, the world was about to hear it. The next morning, the recording went viral. It played on every major news station. The soundbite, we couldn't let him win, was repeated over and over. Sponsors pulled funding. The cycling board scrambled for damage control. And the Southwest Cycling Committee, they were forced to hold an emergency meeting. Jamal and Aaron arrived at the headquarters, cameras flashing as reporters shouted questions. Inside, a group of pale-faced officials sat in stiff suits, their power slipping through their fingers. Martin Lowell stood beside Jamal, now a witness instead of an enforcer. A spokesperson cleared his throat. After reviewing the new evidence, we are reinstating Mr. Kendrick's victory. The room erupted. A journalist called out, "What about the officials who orchestrated this?" The spokesperson adjusted his tie. They have been removed from their positions, effective immediately. Jamal let the words sink in. For the first time in days, he felt himself breathe. Later that night, Jamal stood in front of a small group of kids at his old neighborhood park. They were young, hungry, full of potential, just like he had been. He looked at them, holding his medal in his hand. Winning isn't just about crossing the finish line, he said. It's about what you do when people try to stop you. A boy raised his hand. They tried to cheat you. Why didn't you quit? Jamal smiled. Because quitting is exactly what they wanted. He tossed his medal in the air, and the kids cheered. In that moment, he knew. This wasn't just about his victory. It was about theirs. The future of the sport had just changed. Forever. This story isn't just about Jamal. It's about the silent battles happening in every sport, every profession, every system designed to keep people in their place. But sometimes, the truth is too loud to ignore. What do you think? Have you seen similar injustices in sports? Let's talk about it in the comments. Share this video. Keep the conversation going. Because when we stand together, nobody can rewrite the rules to keep us out.